Hello there. So it is Tuesday, and we are live now on the English Language Club. Thank you all very much for watching. You're all very welcome here. I'm Colin Monroe, and this is my friend Tony Kulpa. Hello.
Hello, everyone. We're excited to have you here. Please let us know when you're in the chat. Let us know where you are watching from, and also don't forget, put any questions you have in the chat. We might not get to them right away, but so try to give us some context if you're responding to something we say.
Yes. So because remember these live streams, they're all about just helping you. Just trying to help you answer any questions you have about English. It can be about pronunciation. It can be about grammar. Last week we talked a lot about idiomatic expressions. So any questions, they're all welcome. You'll notice that I've changed the title from this week. The title is just called the Club Hangouts Live, and that's what these live streams are going to be all about. Just us hanging out, having an informal conversation, and having a good time. So yeah, we've got a few people watching already. A few regulars. Susanta, hello, you're very welcome. Lolly in France. Gaspar in Brazil. And also joined this week by Hardeep. Hello, you're very welcome. And Israk, I've seen you before. So yeah, it's great to see regulars coming back, but it's also great to see new faces, and I hope those new faces will also become regular. So I'll start off while we're waiting for some questions to come in. I was teaching a class this morning with one student, and we came across that common pronunciation problem of the R, the R sound, and the L sound, R and L. A lot of people have problems with that from certain parts of the world. And yeah, it's an interesting one. So I don't know, Tony, if you must have come across that as well before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I always say pronunciation is physical. If you want, because that's how we produce sound. We produce sound by making physical shapes and doing things with our mouth, whether that's our lips or our tongue, our teeth, and our vocal cords. The combination of all those things is how we make sound. So if we're making sound wrong, we need to think about what are we doing physically that's causing the problem. So thinking about the difference between those two sounds is really important. And but what I discovered this morning was that most of the time this student was able to say, or what the student was saying as a R was understandable. But we came across one word, the word tree, which was, and in that sound, in that word, it was not coming out so clearly. And I think that's because when you think about the word, the letters that are before, or the sounds that are before, in particular before, but also after, in the word tree, before the sound, the letter R, or the sound R. You start off with the T sound, and the T sound, you end up with your mouth being in a very similar position to what it would be to make the R sound, tree. So he was saying he was producing the letter R. He sometimes adds a little bit of a trill. You know what I mean? That R.
It's very common, right?
It's very common for people to do that, but that is actually a phonetic, a phoneme in its own right.
Yes.
And I've got the phonetic chart here. I'll just flash it up very quickly. We'll lose Tony for a second.
It's okay.
So we got the phonetic chart here.
For English.
For English. This is important because this is for English. The trill sound R is not on here because technically we don't use it when we're talking English. That's both American English and British English. But a lot of people, maybe their first language is Spanish or another language where they do use it. It sort of creeps in and everyone understands. But in this particular case, in the word tree, because he wasn't going from that t sound, he then wasn't in the right place to make the r sound in the way that he wanted to make it. The r sound was coming out wrong. So I just thought that was really interesting, because it is and we had somebody last week talking about the going from one sound to another. That was a question that came up. It felt like we weren't really equipped to give him a good answer in the moment, because I guess you can. There's lots of you could look at lots of different combinations of sounds.
Yes.
And so if you are interested in that, I think looking at what is known as consonant clusters,
yes.
If you Google that or search for that in YouTube, that would what comes up would be very interesting. And and that's something that maybe I'd like to make some videos on in the future once we've got through all the grammar videos that we're making at the moment and things. So yeah. So let us know if you have any pronunciation issues. I know that a lot of people watching are interested in phonetics, because that's what I've done a lot of videos on before. But yeah, any question is welcome. So, Tony, have we got any good comments so far?
Well, we've got people from so many different places. Lolly Lolly from France, and Susanta from India. Hardeep is from the Punjab. Ishak, I believe, Algeria. Kishore is also joining us from India. Sawana from Thailand. Doan from Vietnam. DDHHD from Myanmar. And let's see. I know, Alia, you've told us where you are before, but I've forgotten. So Israk did have a question that is related to pronunciation, but it's a little bit more of an advanced question. He said that I promised once that I would explain a little bit about assimilation and disassimilation, and he thinks it suits today's lesson. So I'll just share, this is an example of where the right pronunciation is sometimes not what you would find it's not what you would find in phonics, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. The classic, so assimilation is where you pronounce things differently based on the sounds that are around them. A really simple example is the fact that we use the word an in front of a noun that starts with a vowel sound. So we say, I have a banana, but I have an apple, right? And the only reason we do that is because it sounds weird in English, using English sounds to say, I have a apple. And so because that sounds weird,
well,
over a long period of time,
I think it's not so much that it sounds weird, it's just a little bit more difficult to say.
Both.
So,
I think it's, yes, exactly. Because things over time, what is right slowly changes to what is easiest, right? And that tends to be, because it's right, that's what sounds right to us. That's a good point. So a better example of what is actually assimilation is the word impossible. The Latin for that is actually, the prefix is in, so it should be impossible. But that's not the way the word is spelled. That's not the way the word is pronounced. Over time, it has changed, because impossible is there's nothing wrong with that. But the sound for m and p, the m sound, again, the physicality, because the sounds are just what position all the different parts of your mouth take, plus your vocal cords, right? So the sound is also where your lips are pressed close together, is also the starting point for the p sound. Yeah. Right? So m ends with your lips pressed together, p starts with your lips pressed together and then kind of exploding outward, right? So over time, impossible, see, when I say in, my lips are not closed. Yeah. Impossible. So then I change to the p sound. Over time, that has changed to impossible. because those two sounds just fit together really nicely.
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
it's almost as if, like, even if you try and say impossible, just the fact that your mouth is going to that shape to say p, you might end up saying a bit of a anyway. So
Yes.
yeah,
And that's exactly how assimilation happens, is over time, it just goes to whatever makes sense with the mouth. The pronunciations change so that they fit the mouth movements better, right? And
now
sometimes this happens between words. An example, again, the classic example that you'll find in like textbooks is 10 mice. Because the N and the M sound slide together so well, we pronounce that word as if it were one word, and the N and M as if it were one sound. 10 mice just comes off 10 mice almost without saying the N at all. And we get this kind of thing. So that's the answer to Israq's question about assimilation. It's a really fascinating concept, but don't want to go into it too much because it is quite an advanced concept.
And at the English Language Club, we are always trying to focus on phonetics to the extent at which it's helpful to people learning English as a second language, because it is
we like to peel back the layers and find out what's going to help you, as opposed to just a lot of extra information.
Yes, because you can, phonetics is a whole science that people do degrees and masters and PhDs in for the sake of understanding phonetics, and that level. We don't want to go into that level because I want to focus on, what's helpful for people learning English as a second language. Now, there are a few people here asking about
sounds.
Yes. So Susanna started it off. She says, "My D becomes a T. Why?" And then Win also has a similar question. He says, "T will be turned out D like water better." So. Well, that's actually a slightly different thing. In that case, in some sort of regional accents, people drop the T or they say water or better.
Well, this is something we were talking about.
Yeah, go on.
We've talked about this before. There is a softish T that is essentially just a D, and you get it sometimes in the middle of words. So, for instance, you can say better, but that's not what normally people say. They'll say better. Yeah. It's halfway between a D and a T. So Nguyen is very right there. Sometimes the T kind of disappears. It doesn't necessarily drop. It softens. And it is true, like you said, some accents people just say water. But that's not really the correct pronunciation.
A lot of people say that like a London accent, and that where I used to live in London, and I used to talk a lot like that. And now when I hear people speaking like that, it makes me I don't like hearing that. But anyway, Susanna, I have a question for you. And anyone who's confused between the D and the T.
It's a good example.
What do I always say about phonetics? What did I say right at the beginning of this live stream? I said pronunciation is physical. So if there's a mistake you're making or something's not sounding quite right, don't think about the sound. Think about what you're doing physically. Now, I'm going to go back to the phonetic chart again here because this is really important. Sorry to lose you, Tony. So
it's okay.
You can see on this chart we've got the what was it? D and T sounds here. D, T, D, T, D. Now these you can see they are both on the same row. That's because they are both consonants, and one of them is a slightly lighter. They're next to each other, and one of them is a slightly lighter blue to the other. Blue just means they're all vowel sounds. Sorry, consonant sounds. And you'll see that the top two rows. There's 3 rows of consonant sounds, and the top 2 rows are what we call paired consonants. That's because they kind of come in pairs. So if you look at my mouth when I say the 2 sounds, t, d, you can see that physically you can't see very much difference. That's because they are a consonant pair, which means that, yes, they are very similar physically. The only difference is that one is voiced and one is not voiced. So you've got t, that's unvoiced, and d, that's voiced.
So it's just about whether you engage your vocal cords.
Exactly. So yeah, with consonant pairs, with one of them you engage your vocal cords, so it's voiced, and the other one you don't. So with d, you can feel that it vibrates, and with t, you can feel, or you can't feel, that it doesn't.
Exactly.
So let's look at some of the other consonant pairs, because then you'll be able to see that in action again. So let's look at the first one, p, p, and b, p, b. You won't see any difference, because the only difference, it's still physical. It's still a physical difference, but it's happening inside my throat and my vocal cords. So p, that's unvoiced, and b, that's voiced. And the same with the next one along. You've got ch and j, or ch, j, ch, j. And that's true of all of the consonant sounds on these two rows. They're all in pairs, where one is voiced and one isn't. And that is why probably, Susanza, your d is becoming t. It's because you're not you're not using your vocal cords enough, so it's not voiced.
And this is a really common mistake, these pairs of consonants. But fortunately, there's a really easy. The answer to it is really simple. You just pay attention to your vocal cords, right? So hopefully that really helps you.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of people have been commenting about that. Have some other theories about why the d and t is difficult. But I think it's simply down to that, the vocal cords. That's the only difference between those two sounds.
The physicality of pronunciation.
Yeah, and it's tricky because it's physicality, but it's a physicality that you won't see. But you will feel it. You'll definitely feel it when you say it, or if you're holding onto someone's throat when they say it, but that's not likely to happen. But yeah, you'll feel it yourself. Great. So let's see. Any other good comments?
So Nguyen was expanding on the idea of that soft T, like in better, or even the soft D, pointing out that a D can sometimes become a J, like would you like a cup of coffee? Now that's actually a really interesting one. That the J there is kind of it's an example of assimilation in a sort of way. It's a combination of the D and the Y.
Yeah.
Would you? But when you say it together, even if you're not trying to, would you? It sounds more and more like a J, especially the more casually you say it.
And
now,
it's physical. It's physical because you're going into that y sound. So and from a d sound, so you end up sort of merging them together into a j.
Yes, and so this is another example of those consonant. Colin, remind me TR is a consonant.
Cluster?
Yes, that's right. I got it confused with consonant pair there. So yes, a consonant cluster, even though it's in two different words. So these consonant clusters are kind of like a motion of themselves from one letter sound to another letter sound. And every time our mouths make this motion, a certain sound comes out. So the D to Y motion, if you do it fairly quickly and voicing it throughout, you get the J sound.
Yeah, it's similar. It's similar to how we have the diphthongs. The diphthong sounds are technically they're just a type of vowel sound, but they are made up of two vowel sounds that are pronounced within the same syllable. So ia, ua, awa. So normally you can look at most of the phonemes or any of the vowel sounds certainly, and you can say this is the shape your mouth should be. This is where your tongue should be. But with the diphthongs, it's a little bit more complicated because there is a motion.
It's a motion. Involved. And the same for the consonant clusters.
Yeah.
And when you're learning phonics, if you learn phonics either as a child or when you're learning from basics, learning a language, the first step is they teach you, the first thing they do is they teach you the letter sounds, which we do a good job of when we're teaching ESL. We learn the letter sounds. But the second step is to learn the consonant clusters and the diphthongs. And in introductory phonics, they call it blends because it's blending two sounds. So you don't just practice T and R when you're learning phonics. You would also practice the TR sound, ter, because that's a unique motion of your mouth. And there's a lot of these, and it's not everyone needs to practice them all. But especially if there's ones you have trouble with, practicing them.
It depends
is good.
on what your first language is, and because it comes down to whether or not you are accustomed to making these sounds, or more importantly, whether or not you're accustomed to physically putting your mouth and your lips, your tongue in a certain shape, and so depending on what your first language is, you will be accustomed to a lot of sounds, but there may be some that you're not. For example, people who speak Spanish as a first language, they're not accustomed to sticking their tongue out when they say the sound or the sounds, which you need to say that right. And this is why for them sometimes it comes out as a d sound, because they're trying to make a th sound without sticking their tongue out. So the actual motions are just really important, and paying attention to them is really going to make a difference. We've got some more questions. We've got first of all, I want to... There's a good one here from Ishrak. He says, I think the schwa is when we have the R sound at the end.
So he pointed out earlier that when we make the schwa sound, we don't pronounce the R, like as in water and better. But you notice, when I say water and better, I do pronounce the R. Colin, would you say water and better for us?
Water, better.
Aha.
So you're right. Yeah, I was going to say there is a difference between the British pronunciation and American pronunciation with this, when we have the ER sound, or the ER letters, how we pronounce the ER at the end of a word. Brother, mother, father, water. But that's not the only time we use a schwa sound.
No.
That sound, it crops up all over the place. It can be at the middle of words. I think it could even be at the beginning of words.
About.
So it's the schwa sound is not always the spelled with an R. It can be spelled with all sorts of different letters, and that's why
it's an E. Right, like in about, it's an A. It can be any vowel really.
And this is why English is so difficult, because especially the vowels can be spelled in so many different ways. Now you'll notice that I sort of cringed at myself when I said the schwa sound. That's because I hate referring to it as the schwa sound, because it's not the schwa sound. It doesn't sound like a schwa. The reason it's called the schwa is because that is the name of the symbol that we use. I'm just going to go back to the chart again. So which way do I need to go? This way. Sorry, those are the diphthongs. The schwa sound, that's this one. But this one here, for example, this is called an ash sound. Oh, sorry, no, it's not called the ash sound. It's called the ash symbol. So some of the symbols have their own name that often refers to where they come from. But it's not the sound that they make.
The sound of the schwa, by the way, is called a half vowel. We have long and short vowels. There are super short vowels, which are half vowels, and many languages have lots of them. But in English, we only have the one, the sound that is denoted by a schwa. Right. So that regardless of whether it's a super short A, like as in about, or a super short E, as in water, it's pronounced the same way. Just the That's the only half vowel or super short vowel in English.
Yeah. So but then do we really need to know the names, the technical names of these sounds?
No. And so that's the thing. Like you talk about the schwa sound. Like we don't need to know the technical names for it. Sometimes, like you say, calling it the schwa sound is counterproductive. Yeah. I just like to think of it as the short E, like the super short E, right? But it's the same sound as a super short any vowel.
Yeah. And that's the name of the symbol. But in phonetic, but then all of these sounds have a scientific phonetic sound as well. I mean, for example, there might be the front rounded something or other, something or other. I can't
Yes.
think of them off the top of my
Bilabial
head.
fricatives and things.
Yeah,
like this,
yeah, things like that. So, and those, I mean, those are kind of helpful because they relate to how you physically pronounce the sound.
Yes.
Like
Each part of the name relates to a specific part of your mouth and how it moves during that sound. So they are useful, but you wouldn't want to memorize them and learn them the way you learn letters of the alphabet.
In my videos, I've gone through all of the sounds, and I mention the scientific name or the phonetic name for all of them, but I don't remember them off the top of my head, because it's just not really that helpful to know them.
Right.
But yeah. So here's another interesting one. Aaliyah says, why flood and blood is pronouncing not the same as foot and food and foot? So the double O, it's
the double O.
Yes. So in some words it's pronounced and some words it's pronounced oo. So yeah, again, this is just what we're saying. This is one of the difficult things about English. It's not a phonetic language, and this is why it's helpful to use the phonetic chart. I'm just going to go back to it again, Tony. We've got what was it? Blood, flood, and blood. They're using the sound. That's this one, and then food. What would that be? Ooh, ooh. That's this one. Why is there a reason? I don't think there is a reason.
I mean, the reason.
Go on.
The reason is that in English, the spelling of a word doesn't come from its pronunciation. It comes from its origin, its history, not its pronunciation. And this, some languages have kind of gone through a standardization where you kind of force the written to look more like the way it's pronounced, and English just hasn't.
Yeah,
there are rules.
So we've got a lot of words. Some of them come from the Greek. Some of them come from French. Some of them come from Latin.
From German, or Germanic languages, Norwegian or Scandinavian languages.
Yeah, so that's why there's an inconsistency in the spelling, because these words come from different sources. But then again, maybe does that make it easier to learn the language, that it comes from lots of different other languages?
I mean, if you already speak French or Spanish or Italian or Greek or Latin for whatever reason, then there are going to be so many words in English that you're going to immediately recognize. And then there are going to be words in English that you think you know how to say, but that's actually completely wrong. The same if you speak Dutch or German, or to a lesser extent Icelandic or Danish or something like this. There will be loads of words that you will immediately recognize and know how to pronounce. And then there will be other words that look like you should be able to and you can't. And that's just because English comes from these two different families of languages as they've kind of collided with each other over the years. So it helps those people, but someone who's coming from Arabic or an African language or Chinese or an Indian language, it's just confusing. So it's helpful for some people. It's not helpful to other people.
Yeah. Now we're still getting some comments on this. Would you contract where how the d and the y combine? So Aaliyah says you are reducing the gap between d and the y and u, and it creates a y. Or
J.
Yeah, well, so this is where I'm getting a little confused here, because on the phonetic chart, the y, the J symbol is a y sound.
Yes.
It's not a j sound like you might think if it was a letter in the alphabet. And the y that you mentioned, that's not in the phonetics. So yeah, I mean the y of you, it's still a y sound. If you were to write the word you would in phonetic script, you would use the J for the y sound. So it's not that it being with the D makes the y. So it's there anyway.
Well, I don't think she's talking about the y as when she says J. I don't think she's talking about the y. I think she's talking about it sounds like a letter J, like would you. right?
Yeah, but I think that's so that's coming more from the D because
exactly the gap
j.
between the D and the Y doesn't really change, but the D changes to more of a J sound.
Yeah. Great.
So
could you
wakar, or go ahead, sorry.
But yeah, because I think Wynn says, could you say it again? D becomes J, like ending D plus U or your. Yeah, so I think we just clarified
a word
that.
ending in D, when a word ending in D, another word starting in Y comes after it. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, the D sort of changes to a J, like would ya, right? Instead of would you. But you can pronounce it more crisply and keep it as a D sound as well.
Right, but just to clarify, it's a combination of the D and the Y sounds. So
yes,
it's making the J. It's those two sounds together, really. It's not a J sound. There's no such thing really as a J. So well, actually, there is. That's what the which one is it? Which way do I need to go? J. That's what this is, I think. J.
And notice that it's
like
it's compound, right? I can't see it, but so I'm just doing this from memory. The J, the symbol J represents the Y sound, but the symbol for the J sound is two symbols, right?
Yes. So that's J. It's the one that's like a D and then like a little 3.
Yes, that's right. Because so that one's a more complicated sound because see, it's like it's a D with something added to it.
J.
Right.
J. Yeah. J.
Yeah.
And we have that symbol that looks like a 3 on its own as well. And when we have that is a sort of j sound.
Yes.
Again, it's also a consonant pair, so we've got sh and j, sh, j. But then that with the d makes a j. And yes. And
Alia is pointing out there's other times that you use this sound. The words graduation, graduated, education, gradually. The j sound is exactly right. So the du in English also usually makes that j sound. That's a good observation, Alia. Yes.
And great examples. Thank you so much for that.
We got some other. Susanta's pointing out some other ones. I don't know if you want to talk about these. That T plus a Y often makes a ch.
Yeah.
S plus a Y makes a sh, and a Z or a Z plus a Y makes a j.
Yeah. So this is why the phonetic chart is great because you've got a different sound, a different symbol for each one of these sounds. Because it gets confusing when we start saying things like D plus or D plus Y equals J. Because are you talking about the Y sound or
right. And this is great when you look up a word in a dictionary. Sometimes not in a book dictionary. It depends on when the dictionary was made. But you'll get the word spelled out using these symbols. So if you're ever not sure which sound it is, I know some people. I have a lot of trouble listening to a word and figuring out which sounds are in it. Sometimes I need to see it. And so if you look up a word, especially on the internet, in a dictionary, it will spell it out for you using those symbols, and you can look at those individual symbols and figure out exactly what sound it is that you're having trouble with.
Yeah. So Wynn says, I always put the wrong stress on a word. I have to memorize a lot of formulas, so I get confused. So that's an interesting one. Stress. That's not something that I've made many videos on, and that is something I should make some more videos on because that is helpful to people. Is there any way that people can know what where an easy way to remember where to put the stress? I'm just trying to think about it now. Isn't it normally, don't quote me on this, but isn't it something like normally it's just the first vowel unless it's a different word like produce or produce, like the two words that are spelled the same but they have a different stress?
Well, it's not just
it's
about
not always that, is it? Yeah.
whether it's the same. It's whether it's a noun or it's a verb. There is a general rule that the accent or the stress moves to the beginning of the word for nouns and to the end of the word for verbs in English.
Yeah.
This isn't a hard and fast rule, and I'm not even sure it's most of the time, but it's the only rule that I can think of off the top of my head that's simple enough to kind of, count as a core idea.
Yeah, but you see, so because of that, I feel like it's not a rule that's going to be helpful because people are,
if in doubt, that's the way I would lean. If I had a word and I didn't know how it was stressed, that would be my if I didn't know anything else about it, what I'd try to do is stress it towards the beginning with a noun and towards the end with a verb. Maybe we can look.
But normally you're learning
specific.
a word because you've heard it in a movie or a song, or you keep hearing people say it. So I think normally that's how you should learn vocabulary. That's the best way to learn vocabulary because
it's hearing it.
You'll have heard it. Now, if you're reading a book and you see a word and you don't know how to pronounce it, then that's when looking it up. I think even when you look something up in Google Translate or
it will show
it shows the stress. It shows the phonetic transcription. So that's when the phonetic chart and the transcription. It should show the stress. The stress would normally be indicated by a little dash or a comma.
An apostrophe,
apostrophe, sorry, yeah.
And one question we had several weeks ago, if the word only has one syllable, sometimes a dictionary won't show the stress, but there is still stress. There are almost no words in English that don't have a stress. Even very short single-syllable words will still have a stress. Israk is pointing something out. She mentioned that the pronunciation does differ, and accent stress can be part of that. This is something that I've even noticed between Canadian and English, Canadian and American English, which are normally very close in their pronunciation. Sometimes the only thing that's different is the stress. On the word that will be placed differently in American English versus Canadian English. So that's a good point that Israk brought up.
Yeah, that is.
Stress isn't something you can always know for sure. Sometimes even in a local dialect, the stress on certain words will be different.
Yeah, and this is why I say I think listening is the most important.
The best way to do it.
The best way to learn about stress and things. So Annie says, please answer my question. We must have skipped over. Oh no, yeah, I think just before. How step 2 can speak English well? So what step? I guess I'll rephrase that. What steps are there to learn English well? Well, that's obviously a very big question, and the simple answer is practice. And studying. But I will say, as you mentioned the word step there, I think there is a 3-step process. And I've mentioned this before, where you sort of learn something in an academic context first. That's step 1. And then step 2 is you then start to hear that being used by native speakers or in people when they're speaking English. And then the 3rd step is that once you've heard it being used, then you get the confidence to sort of start using it yourself. I noticed this myself in my own language learning in Spanish. When you learn a language, as you all know, at first you don't understand anything, and you've got no clue what's being said. Then as you start to learn things, you develop your vocabulary. You start to hear those words, and you can, although you don't understand the whole sentence, you can pick out a few words, and then that combined with like the context and maybe hand gestures and facial expressions, you can start to understand what the person means, even though you don't understand it completely. And so language learning is a process of just understanding more and more and relying less and less on context and
exactly
and things.
And
that's,
don't
go on. Yeah.
No, and don't be frustrated that you forget things. This is a natural part of the learning process, like Colin was pointing out. You're
Yes.
going to have to look. It's not even just, it's a sad reality. This is just how our brains work. You're going to learn and forget and learn and forget the same concept several times before you actually learn it. Because language is not like a fact. You can remember a history fact, or you can remember a person's favorite color or whatever, and it's just in your brain as a fact. Language is not like this. The way it's stored in your brain is totally differently, and so you can't just memorize it. It's just not how it works. You have to go through this process that Colin's talking about.
Yeah.
And one thing that I would like to point out, it's not one of the steps, but I think it's a very important thing to have alongside that. Not all, but many of the people that I've worked with who have learned English as adults, as opposed to they just had it in school, had something they were passionate about and they had to do in order to in English. So, for instance, they really liked music, and they listened to a lot of English music, and this gave them the motivation to stick with it and to keep listening to English even when they were frustrated that they didn't understand or they kept forgetting words. Or people who did business and they were speaking to people in English all the time. Even when they were making mistakes, they had to keep going because it was part of their job. So if you have something that you're passionate about that is going to help motivate you, that will make a big difference.
Yeah, and just when I was learning Spanish, I learned a few. Well, what it is, I used to do magic tricks, and I sort of had a sort of script in English for each of these magic tricks, and I basically wrote out those scripts in English, and I went with an English teacher to help me translate them, and because I knew that I would say these phrases, these sentences a lot, so I would say, do something like that. Maybe I'll ask you a question. Tell me about yourself. So a very simple question like that. Write down how would the interesting things about you. What music do you like? What countries have you been to? What are you studying? What do you want to do with your life? How do you want to impact humanity? Things like that. Write them down in your own language, and then try and translate that into English, and then you will find that what you write in English is things that you will use a lot and that you will say a lot, and not just because you're repeating about yourself, but you'll then, in that process, you will learn those words, you will learn those grammatical structures, those expressions, and you will be able to use them in other ways as well. So that's another great way to learn English. Now, hopefully that's helpful. But I do suspect that you were hoping there would be some easy steps that you can take. Do this, do that, and you'll know English. Unfortunately, I mean, we described those steps, but that's just to sort of learn each individual phrase, and you have to then repeat those steps for every kind of concept and piece of vocabulary and expression. And it's learning a second language kind of never ends.
Yes.
Even a first language. There's always,
really, that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, English is always changing. There's always new expressions. There's always new abbreviations. We're getting like text speak now. A lot of people
showing up in the dictionary now.
Yeah, that sort of thing showing up in the dictionary. So it's new. There's new vocabulary being invented. So don't think of it as something you need to do and then it's done, because it will never be like that. Just think of it as an ongoing challenge that you are rising up to. I hope that's helpful. Let's see. We've got AJ's joined us. AJ.
AJ.
Hello, AJ. Hope you're having a good time. So Annie says, thanks a million, sir. So presumably that was helpful. If it was, and you haven't already done so, please give us a thumbs up, give us a like. We've got 13 likes so far, according to the data I can see. So that's great. Thank you very much. But yeah, those likes really do help us. So if you are still here, still watching, please do give us a like. We've got 14 now, so that's great. Thank you so much. So let's see.
We've got several more questions about pronunciation. Way back up, Wakar Ahmed asked the word isthmus. How do you pronounce both an S and then a TH? And honestly, pronouncing the word isthmus,
I've never heard that word.
It's just a really annoying and hard to say word. It's isthmus. It's like a peninsula, but where it has land on both ends. So Panama is an isthmus. Right. Connects to.
Well, I just said you're even always learning your first language. Yeah. That word is new to me.
So Wakar, the word isthmus is just really hard to pronounce. It does not matter who you are. I mean, actually, maybe I think it maybe comes from Greek. Maybe if you're Greek, it's easy to say.
It sounds Greek. Know. Yeah.
But you just say that the S sound and the TH sound separately. In that one, the TH is a little bit less strong, isthmus, but it's just hard to say. So I can't really give you any good tips on that one.
So
let's see. Also, Lolly Lolly brought up a really common question, and so I'm really glad that you brought this up. Words ending in ing, I don't hear the G. And that's because it's not there. There is no G sound in ing.
As in G, when you say G, you mean G, right? So going back to the chart,
yes.
Here we've got the G sound, which is paired with a K. So K, G. The difference is that the one is voiced and one's not. But the sound that you have when you have ing is this one. Which is a sound. No, hang on. What am I talking about? Yeah. G. It's not like a G. It's more like a but it's got this. It's difficult to describe, but G, the tongue is sort of further back. So instead of being it's So listening, thinking. That's what that sound is. Yeah, is that what you were getting at, Tony? Is that helpful?
Yes, yeah. So it's a completely different sound. But fortunately, this one is pretty consistent. If you see an N and a G together in English, it's going to make that sound, and not there's no G in it.
Yeah. Now, Annie goes on to say, what do I do if I'm shy to speak to people in English? And so this is a really it's not really about English, but it is a barrier for people learning a second language or any language. It certainly affected me, when I've tried to learn Spanish. And I've had students who have experienced this in varying degrees. Some who are very shy and will never sort of speak unless they are certain that that they're right. And I would say you just need to. It's something you do need to overcome, because and you mustn't be afraid of making mistakes. That's what it comes down to. Remember that. So I suppose don't take things too seriously.
Yes.
People will understand that you are speaking English as a second language. It's not going to be perfect. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, you learn from your mistakes. So
yes.
You should be trying to make mistakes. If you're not making any mistakes, you're not trying hard enough.
You're not learning, right? You're not trying things that are hard. And this goes back to what Colin was pointing out. The process of learning something and forgetting it is part of language acquisition. It's part of how you learn. So if you aren't in situations where you're trying to use a word and you know that word but you can't think of it, or you know a word but you pronounce it wrong, every one of those mistakes is part of your learning process. So one thing is you just have to not be afraid of making mistakes. Another thing, depending on where you are, if you can find someone who is a native English speaker in your area who is trying to learn your language, this is one of the best ways to overcome feeling like your English isn't good enough. Because if you hear someone who's speaking your language for the first time, they're going to be so bad. I almost guarantee you that your English will be better than their whatever your local language is, right? And so that helps you build confidence when you realize that other people, that other person knows how hard it is to speak in another language.
Yeah. But and taking that step to actually speak to someone else in English is, I would say, essential. I mean, yes, it's helpful to watch movies and listen to music and to read and to study, but you're never going to get to that level of fluency without actually, talking to people in real life, whether that's physically or online, and I do want to be able to offer some sort of a service, some group chats, live streams via Zoom, so we can do some of that. We've talked about this in the past. That is part of the plan. It will happen at some point in the future. We're just not able to offer that right now because we are focusing on developing this English language course called Inside English, which will be available on the website. Although you won't see much new content has come out in the last few months, that's because I've been working on, or we've both been working on this course. So not much content's come out in the last couple of months, but a lot of content will come out all in one go.
Yes.
Soon, hopefully. So yeah. So thank you to everyone who's given us a thumbs up. We're up to 18 now, so that's brilliant.
Oh, I wonder if we'll make 20.
Hopefully, yeah. We don't. That's always the goal. So let's see. Now, Mandolin says, "What's the difference between the schwa sound? It would be even softer than that, and ah. Now, I'm going to go back to the chart. Oh, and actually, Suzanne says that's my question too. So I'm going to go back to the chart now.
The chart is so helpful.
Talking about the vowels, this is just only relates to the vowel sounds, but I'm going to go through the sounds. So look, we've got e, I, u. So look at my mouth there. As I go from the left to the right, I'm starting with my mouth kind of out like this. E, I, u. It starts out and comes in. E, I, u. So as you go left to right, it refers very roughly to the shape of the mouth. And on the second row, or actually, let me go like the first column. So I'm going to say E, E, A. E, E, A. So you can see as I go through those sounds that my mouth starts quite closed, E, and then E, it's about halfway open, and then A, it's wide open. So the position of the layout is, there's a logic to it, and it relates to the physicality. This is why I always say pronunciation is physical. So looking at these two sounds, then the schwa sound and the sound. We got ah. So physically, the difference is that the mouth is open more when we say the sound. I suppose that's not the only difference. There are some other more technical differences, I think. So the schwa sound is softer normally, but yeah, that's the main difference. That is the main difference. Your mouth is open more when we say ah. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Yes, and again, that the symbol schwa is the shortest sound in English, as far as I know. It's like half a vowel. It's barely even pronounced in some words.
Yeah. Okay. I hope that answers the question then. Let's see. Mr. Ecuador. I haven't seen you today, but yeah, he's here. I just lost that question. Where did it go?
Here, I'll read it. Hi, can you tell us why English speakers write down, for instance, $8, but they read it as $8. Dollar sign is before, not after the number. This is actually it's the same in for British pounds, right? You write the pound symbol before. This actually, and I've seen this different in some languages. This is actually because when you would write a ledger, like someone's writing a list of how much something costs, they just put the dollar sign or the pound symbol or whatever at the left side because that's the beginning of the page. For in English, we write left to right. I've seen in some other languages, they put the symbol for dollar sign on the other side, but several of those, it's right to left languages. So I think that's probably part of it there. In English, that's the reason why we do it, is just because on a ledger, you'd put the symbol on the left side of the page. And yes, it does mean that you say it in the opposite order of how you read it. But it's just to let you know as soon as you get to a number, let you know whether it's a money number or a different kind of number.
Yeah. So Aliyah was asking about the word cringed, because I used that word when I was talking about the schwa sound, because it's not really the schwa sound. So cringe, that means what's the best way to describe it? Like I felt uncomfortable when I said that. When you think of is that a good way to describe it, Tony?
Yeah, yeah.
So to cringe, and sometimes you'll hear people describing using an adjective, cringy, I suppose,
or cringeworthy.
So to cringe is a verb, and I cringed is the past tense. But yeah, there is the adjective form as well. Something is cringy. It means it makes you uncomfortable when you say it. Let's see. Any other good comments you've seen?
Well, there's been some discussion about how S and SH interact. And one of the things, Nguyen points out that in pressure, it's spelled with two S's. And in that case, the two S's change to a sh sound. But this is not really a rule. It's something that sometimes happens. Some S's, especially in this case, it's more because the S comes before a U. So, for instance, in Nguyen points out sure, S-U-R-E. Also, we use an SH sound instead of an S sound.
In fact,
so it's
I'm
more
sure that some people who struggle with spelling would actually put an H in there, because we do say it with an H, or with a sh, which is normally SH.
Right.
But yeah, it just comes down to the big problem that English spelling, English is not phonetic, so the spelling is inconsistent.
And so in this case, it's because Nguyen points out the word soul, I'll use an S. And in this case, it is the SU sound. Just like the DU sound, or a DU letters together often make the J sound like a J, like as in graduate or educate. The SU often changes to a sh instead of an S sound.
Yeah, but not always, though.
Not always.
Summer and so.
I mean, again, there is a rule. There are rules to this, but it is a long. Yeah, it's an S.
This is the point at which I think we've got to where learning the rules becomes counterproductive. It's harder to learn the rules than it is to. These are layers.
Exactly. And it's fine. Like you can answer the question, and it's important to know there are rules to these things, but there are so many rules that it's not necessarily useful to spend your time on it. The core idea of pronunciation is listen to how people pronounce words. Your brain does this better. Your brain does not do a good job of looking at a word and ticking through all of the rules and figuring out how to pronounce it. This is great if you are trying to study an ancient language, for instance, and you're looking at some ancient text and trying to piece together but that's not how it works when we're speaking. It's too slow, and it's just not how your brain does this. Your brain will try to pronounce the word whatever feels naturally to your brain. And so in order to pronounce the word correctly, you have to hear that word spoken, preferably by native speakers, as often as possible. So that's the core idea. If you want to pronounce your words correctly as opposed to your sounds, because pronouncing sounds, the core idea is it's physical. The core idea, but for pronouncing words, is listen to people speaking English using those words.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. There's some other talk about the TI. Let's see. Oh, and the R sound. There's no vowel after R. We drop R as in air. Air. Well, I think the R in air is still being pronounced because you got the air. But yeah,
if this is a question about spelling,
yeah,
which I think it might be talking about dropping the E. Spelling rules in English are much worse than the pronunciation rules. Again, because they come from different languages. So I really don't think it's a good idea to be worrying about spelling rules like when you drop an E.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's not a rule here that we can give you that's helpful. But again, I would say this is why the phonetic chart is helpful, because there are 44 different sounds in English, but we only have 26 letters in our alphabet. So there's a lot of sounds that don't have their own letter. And so that means that there's a lot of inconsistency when we start combining different letters to make different sounds.
Yeah.
And so this is why rules don't really work. But listening and just sort of learning subconsciously is the best way to do this, to learn this kind of thing.
About that specific word, though, in British English, do you pronounce the R in that word?
Sorry? I was reading
in British English, do you pronounce the R in the word air?
Well, it depends what you mean by do we pronounce it, because how do you pronounce the letter R? It's pronounced in different ways. So does it have an effect? You see, if it was just AI, I would pronounce that I. But because there's an R on the end, I would say air. So yes, we do pronounce it.
Because of the schwa, really.
Yeah.
So there's not a rule about whether there's a vowel at the end, because, for instance, turn. Obviously, in American or Canadian English, we pronounce that R hard, turn. But in British English, you still pronounce it with that same way that you would if the R was at the end of the word. Am I right? It's turn, not
turn.
Turn,
yeah.
Right?
Not turn. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not about whether there's a something at the end of the vowel or at the end of the R necessarily.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Ishrak's asking, Sir, I couldn't find your Instagram. I really want to join the Zoom meetings, but I don't know how to find you. We haven't started doing the Instagram meetings yet. Those are planned for the future, for something we want to do after we finished the course Inside English. Then, yes, I want to do a lot more stuff on other platforms. But I have my own Instagram account. Which is, I think if you just search for Colin Munro, I'll type it in the chat for you. You should find it. But I am going to start a English Language Club Instagram. In fact, I have started it. So if you search for English Language Club or the English Language Club, you should find that there as well. There's not a lot of content on there yet, but that will be the main place where we start promoting the future live streams and future whatever we start doing in the future. I'll promote that more through the English Language Club Instagram. And so up until now, I did put some English pronunciation stuff, mainly phonetics stuff, on my own account. That was sort of an experiment that I did a long time ago. Then I stopped posting. I haven't posted really on Instagram for a long time, but I do want to change that now because that's in my own name. I want to make that more of a personal Instagram account and start doing English teaching things on my Instagram, on the English Language Club Instagram. So by all means, follow them both, but especially the English Language Club one. Even though there's not much there now, that's where we're going to be working hard on that to make interesting content, using the stories, making little quiz questions, little videos explaining explaining the right answers and things like that. I've got lots of ideas. I haven't had the time to implement them. But we've talked about that, Tony and I.
So
as well.
So look forward to lots of things coming up soon. Yes.
Yes, but don't worry, you're not missing out on much now.
No.
But do follow both those accounts on Instagram. But the most important thing, sign up to the mailing list. If you go to the website, you'll see one of the buttons there is one of the links is to go to a page where you can join the mailing list. Again, I don't post a lot of stuff on to the mailing list, but when we do start doing when we have important things to say, we will use the mailing list to say it. So once the Inside English course is ready to go, and we start doing Instagram, the mailing list is the best. It's going to be a good place to hear about that.
Yes.
So yeah, and obviously make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. I'm sure that you all already are. So yeah, that's going to be a great way to stay in touch because of these live streams. Yeah, I mean, Tony, do you have Instagram? Do you want to talk about that or?
No, I don't right now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, there's loads of great people on Instagram teaching English. And one of the things I want to do once we've got the course up and running is reach out to lots of those people and, just have a chat with them as a live stream, maybe on Instagram, but then maybe also do something on YouTube as well. So I'll be starting a new Instagram account, and there are people out there who've got very established Instagram accounts. So it'd be great for me to meet their audience there on YouTube. But I've got quite a lot of followers or sort of subscribers here on YouTube, and so we can help each other. So if you are a teacher or you know a teacher or who's on Instagram or who might be interested in doing some kind of a collaboration with me like that, please let me know. Let them know about me. I do want to do some things like that. I am at the moment though. The time is really an issue. But the plan is to do stuff like that, and hopefully we'll get the time soon. Anyway, that's probably a good place to end. We've gone on an hour and 7 minutes already. So, Tony, is there anything else? Do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I'm so excited. The likes on the video got above 20. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, if you haven't given us a like, we've got 21 people watching and only 20 likes. So there must be at least one of you who hasn't given us a like yet. So please do. Oh, we've got 22 now. 22 people watching. Great. Well, anyway, I've had a great time today, as I always do.
Yes.
So thank you so much for watching and being with us. And hopefully we'll see you next week.